So, welcome everybody to the 9th annual IAA UT Austin Space Traffic Management Conference. Clearly it hasn't happened here all 9 years. It started with the wonderful Diane Howard at Embry-Riddle and moved this way a few years ago, and then we got IAA partnership a few years after that. But this has been excellent every time that it happens, and I think the thing that I appreciate the most about it is that we focus on what's relevant at the time and where we see the community needing to go, and the fact that all of you in the room get to chime in and make this very dynamic. And you know, whoever the speakers are and people on the panel, everybody knows that it's open for community involvement, which is the way we like that. So it's live streams, so it's near real-time stuff, and all of you get to comment, make suggestions, hold people accountable for what they're saying, keep people honest, all these sorts of things. So this is all of your conference, not just mine. We got a lot of stuff happening in space in the world today, but certainly in space. And we see that, you know, near Earth orbit is getting more and more congested. We see that we put these robots in the sky called satellites into very specific orbital highways. These highways have finite carrying capacity. That capacity is becoming more and more saturated. Saturation of orbital carrying capacity looks a lot like us not being able to prevent undesirable things from happening in space. Collisions are one of them. But I can tell you right now, I've even spoken to some NASA folks that have missions in Earth orbit, and they're saying that they can't even get the right science out of it because they have to maneuver out of the way so frequently because of debris. So there are real effects and impacts detrimental to humanity as a consequence of the uncoordinated, unplanned use and exploitation of near-Earth orbital space. One of the ideas that we have in terms of trying to achieve environmentalism in space, space environmentalism, protecting that as an ecosystem of sorts in dire need of environmental protection, and trying to achieve space sustainability, which is really uniquely about humanity's ability to utilize space in perpetuity, freely and in an unhindered way. This idea of trying to develop a circular space economy, which focuses first and foremost on the prevention of pollution by minimizing single-use launch vehicles and satellites. Just like we try to minimize single-use plastics, how can we minimize single-use rockets and satellites? Clearly, SpaceX shows that we can do the reusable rocket thing, but we don't necessarily have reusable and recyclable satellites on orbit. That would be a very good thing to be able to achieve, and I think that we have the technology to achieve such things. We have companies that are all about in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. We could support the growth and development of that. For things that can't be, you know, reused or recycled, then we need to focus on what responsible disposal means. And disposal doesn't mean you just let your thing die and let Mother Nature try to cleanse it. I would sustain that uncontrolled reentries are abandonment and not disposal. Just saying, oh, I have something sufficiently low and I'm going to let Mother Nature figure out when to bring the thing to re-enter is probably not very good. And certainly for rocket bodies, I don't know, you can, I'd love to see a show of hands. How many people think that school bus sized objects being able to impact the planet in places we can't predict is a great idea? Yeah, okay. So I think we need to find a way to not do that anymore and send a message across humanity that that's not something that we want to tolerate as a humanity, for instance. And talking about reentries, having all these things burn up in the atmosphere, what's the impact to the atmosphere itself in terms of atmospheric health? And can we design satellites? Can we incentivize industry to design satellites of materials that when these things do burn up in the atmosphere, that they're not polluting the atmosphere itself? That would be a nice thing. So that's pretty much like, in large part, the thematic of this year's conference. I would very much appreciate if everybody in the room has that in the back of their mind to try to interweave that within the things that we talk about and discuss openly, cordially, and all these things. And with that said, I will say that today I'll be sparsely seen here. Tomorrow I'll be seeing more. I just got quite a few things going on, but this is near and dear to my heart. So you'll see me in and out today. And with that, I'd like to introduce some opening remarks from our president of the International Academy of Astronautics, John Schumacher.
Thank you, Moriba. It's great to be here, and it's a privilege for the Academy to be partnering with University of Texas on this very important topic. The Academy has worked on this for several decades, the whole space traffic management. We bring academicians, 1,200 space experts from around the world, 90 different countries, and Dr. Yah is one of them, thank goodness. So to tie in with UT, and this conference is so tremendous because it brings together academia, it brings together government, and it brings together entrepreneurs. We've been talking about this problem for 20, 30 years. I remember when I was first at NASA, we talked about orbital debris and how to start doing that. People have struggled with different ways to handle that and how to make it, and if you hit the conference topics, environmentally sound and a sustainable economy, it's all doable. And we have the great minds in this room that are really starting to tackle that problem. And in one way, the growth of LEO constellations is a really big issue. Another way, it might provide that economic spark to make it much more sustainable. So really look forward to the conference here. Great to be a part of this, and it's a privilege to be here with you all. I will tell you, and folks around the world on the phone, I have a presentation. I'm going to go through it. It just tells you about the International Academy. We've focused on key areas since the 60s when the Academy was set up, whether it's small sat, space technology, innovation to promote human, the development of economies and sustainable societies around the world, all kinds of things. This topic is right now one of our biggest because it ties so many interdisciplinary things together. So if there's a key thing in my presentation I'd offer to you, the International Academy is a group of academicians, and we wear big robes and hats and everything, and more about not really. But even if you're not an academician, you want to get to learn more about the Academy, anyone can participate on one of our study groups. Anyone can put papers into our journal, all different types of things. Peer reviewed, is the #1 space journal in the world. So plenty of ways to intersect with us and be part of that, whether it's space traffic management, small sats, take your pick across the topic set. So, and the web links are in there. So welcome that in. And thank you again. And great to be a part of this conference.
All right, well, thank you very much. Basically, we are ahead of schedule, which is awesome. So let's do a coffee break. I'm just joking. All right, look, I want this to be as informal as it needs to be. I want people to just kind of let their hair down and just be comfortable. Be comfortable and just interact, and let's have some fun and not take ourselves too seriously, even though we kind of need to. So next on the list, we have who's going to do the introduction today?
William Woods.
Okay, William Woods.
Yeah.
All right.
The NorthStar.
Here you go. You're going to do the intro, say some awesome things, and then we're going to get to our keynote. By the way, sorry. I just wanted to see if you can remove your hand from the microphone. And you did. Awesome. Great reflexes. So here's the deal. The keynotes are switched today. So Richard Dalbello is going to be here leading the keynote tomorrow, and then Mark is going to be the keynote for today. So anyway, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I will do my best to keep Austin weird as well.
Good man.
So my name is William Woods, and I work for NorthStar Earth and Space Systems as a lead scientist for space situational awareness activities. And I am honored to be here today in place of my colleague, Fred Peltier. Fred Peltier is NorthStar's chief scientist for SSA, so the lead scientist is here, and the chief scientist is through the roof probably. And unfortunately, he's unable to attend, but I'm happy to be here in his place talking to you all today a little bit about NorthStar and then introducing Mark. As you may know, Fred served actually as a chief navigator for the New Horizons mission to Pluto and onward toward the asteroid Ultima Thule. And believe it or not, while I was in my PhD program at Stanford University, I supported the radio occultation instrument on board New Horizons as well. Of course, I had no idea about this connection between us at this time. But I point this out because much of NorthStar's unique contribution that I'm going to talk to you about here is derived from experience. Experience from guys like Fred, experience from guys like me, people like me, and we're leveraging information needed for deep space navigation. That's where it started, and now we're looking at space situational awareness in Earth orbit. So NorthStar's mission is to contribute new and valuable sources of information to help build more comprehensive understanding of the space environment. And I'm confident that those of us gathered here, well, we can agree that the commercial industry can provide and leverage valuable new sources of data and analytics on known and unknown objects. Leveraging innovation and speed from commercial industry is an essential step towards ensuring the safety and sustainability of space. Now at NorthStar, we aim to support the commercial space industry, but we are also engaged with the DoD, with the intelligence community, and with our allies. All of us need better SSA and enhanced space domain awareness. So specifically, NorthStar was established to address significant challenges that include limited coverage and collection gaps in all orbit regimes. So behind me in this animation, you can see essentially a description of NorthStar's CONOPS, and I would love to speak in great detail about how exactly this works, but I'll be here all day today and tomorrow, so you can come and ask me more about it. But basically launching a constellation, the first 3 of 24 planned electro-optical satellites this summer. And the CONOPS are unique in that the constellation is always on, looking out into space. You can simultaneously collect information from objects in LEO, MEO, GEO, and beyond because of the CONOPS of this sensor. We transform images into a suite of enhanced SSA information and deliver it to customers in a as-a-service business model. We also integrate third-party sources of ground-based and space-based information to enhance our collection and deliver end-to-end solutions to detect, track, identify, characterize objects in space. There is no single source of data that's going to do this, that's going to provide persistent space situational awareness of Earth orbit. So data fusion is essential. And to that end, I hope to engage with and perhaps collaborate with many of you here who may have new and exciting capabilities. So we are honored also in NorthStar to have been one of 7 companies awarded the first commercial SSA contracts by NOAA's Office of Space Commerce recently. And this NOAA Geo pilot program was designed to help establish how commercial SSA services can be used to augment or replace government services for commercial and civil space traffic coordination. We are eager and honored to help tackle the urgent challenges of space sustainability in collaboration with other players engaged in space traffic coordination. SSA is certainly a team sport, and we learned that very much in the Department of Commerce pilot. So as I said, we're going to be launching our first 3 satellites this summer. And also, just so you know, we're recruiting in all our offices here in the US, in Canada, and even in Luxembourg, for those who might be interested in that. But let me jump now. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of time to learn about NorthStar. Appreciate your patience there. And it is now my pleasure to shift gears and introduce our first speaker, Mark Baird, the president of Virgin Orbit National Systems. Mark is an enthusiastic and highly experienced military, government, intelligence community, and space industry veteran. He brings to Virgin Orbit over 30 years of experience leading and driving large, diverse organizations through significant and pivotal change. This includes proven expertise building, articulating, and executing complex strategies, multi-billion-dollar budgets, and program efforts across multiple levels of equity. And he has had extensive interface with industry, Congress, the Executive Office of the President, corporate boards, and Department of Defense oversight organizations. Prior to assuming the helm at Virgin Orbit National Systems, He served as Principal Director of Strategic Integration for Lockheed Martin Space in their Special Programs line of business, where he led strategy and program performance in support of national security space customers. When Mark retired from a distinguished Air Force career, he hung up his uniform, but then rolled up his sleeves as a senior civilian in the critical role of Deputy Director of the Space Force Planning Task Force. There, he was responsible for the detailed planning activities associated with stand-up of the United States Space Force itself. He also served as Deputy Director of the National Reconnaissance Office, where he engaged with combatant commanders, intelligence community, DoD officials, and Hill staff in building and operating a broad portfolio of space capabilities. He likewise served as Director for Space Acquisition for the Secretary of the Air Force, and notably as Vice Commander of the Legacy Space and Missile Systems Center, supporting all activities associated with the $13 billion portfolio of Air Force space programs. Mark served twice in prestigious fellowships, first on Capitol Hill as a legislative fellow, then with Deutsche Bank in their London offices as part of the Secretary of Defense Corporate Fellows Program. Wow. All right, everybody, please join me in welcoming Mark Baird.
Flicker.
On the podium, yes.
Yeah, when I hear all that, I just, I'm check. Good. Yeah, when I hear all that, I just feel old. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm like Ferris Bueller and just our Forrest Gump brother. It's just like pop in and all these great things have happened over the years. So anyway, it's great to see everyone, and I do want to follow orders here. This is a dynamic discussion. I've got some charts. I work at Virgin Orbit National Systems. We'll talk about that, but I don't want to sell it. This is not a sales pitch. I wanted to frame a conversation around the subject here. So I really do want to hear what you have to say. I mean, we took these charts from a conversation that we are having with Indo-PACOM right now. We had a group going yesterday, and we'll be going out to talk to them, but they've got a real issue. So I just want to be able to talk about that. So I got a few charts. I got a video that's really cool, I think, but I really do want to hear what you guys have to say. So just as a bit of background, I used to run, be a part of, I should say, the JMS program, which was really trying to get its head around space traffic management. How do we understand what's up there? Because space is a contested domain. You've all heard that. That's not news. But there's a lot of things that are associated with that. So let's go. I guess I got the clicker, so I can pull. All right. So the truism of human nature, nothing changes, right? 544 BC, the high ground is important. I mean, Sun Tzu, he who knows himself and his enemy will never have a problem in conflict. So, excuse me. But the point here is there's nothing that has changed. And one of the things that when we were standing up the Space Force that was interesting is the space domain a Air Force mission or a Space Force mission, or is it a naval mission? Because back in Mahan is one of the fathers of the Navy, and it's like you need to control the commerce of the high seas, because that's what enables power and equivalency for new nations that are standing up in kind of the global good, for lack of a better term. So the point here is nothing has changed. This is the way it's always been, and now we're just elevating this into space as the global commerce, if you will. So the big debate was: is this a naval mission? Should we think about it in naval terms, or should we think about it in Air Force terms? Because they're really different, believe me, as a career Air Force officer. And so you see General Raymond's comments that this is not just warfighting, it's the global commerce. So, but my comments will be mostly around the defense part of this, but really the defense is to keep things safe so that we can expand into space. And I'm a Florida State guy, so all the circular space economy stuff, and then that's way too past where I'm at, so. I'll just tell you what I think, and I look forward to any questions, you know, interrupt me, whatever you'd like to do, but this is the point that I wanted to make, that nothing has changed here. Now we have just elevated into space, and what is the use of it? Traffic management is hugely important, and knowing what's friend, what's foe is important. So can you run the video? So you'll see some people that you may recognize here, and just, again, I'm not trying to sell Virgin Orbit, so this kind of frame.
Regarding the South Tennessee scenario, I've seen it many, many times. It really have was responsiveness in March. Something everybody knew was helping many times, but it wasn't everything. If you know, it was very important to try to keep that going, because it was everything to the public.
Then most recently, in 2021, when Russians shut down one of their satellites, Russians in their computer company did pretty great threats against the American GPS system.
That Ukraine is just up and over. Everybody's thinking about, I'm hoping Trump doesn't break out. Well, it's going out.
More interesting, more information in space is the most efficient practice. Correct. Every day, information. Inevitably, information is going to be the key to military victory. Our current space posture is too vulnerable to attacks that could occur too quickly and which would take too long to bust your cover. We need to fill that gap at a time. And that is where the ability to launch rapidly, to launch from anywhere, and to launch into any orbit is so important. And that capability is given by airborne launch.
From the standpoint of American national security, the launch site of Cape Canaveral and the launch site of Denver have been immensely important. Here's an interesting data point about Cape Canaveral. Everyone knows what it is. Everyone knows where it is. In fact, the stakes are extremely high and the homeland gets attacked. These very well-known places are probably at risk.
Since they're on the ground, they are vulnerable to weather. Anything below the clouds is going to be influenced by the weather.
But at wartime, when you have a bad weather situation, sometimes you can get waiting on it. Sometimes you still need to press forward.
The idea of a airplane that can fly thousands of miles and then launch a satellite gives a tremendous degree of flexibility.
In the domain of space, there's this very specific advantage of having global mobility. If you're able to find yourself in a place where the capability can be delivered in spite of whatever the weather may throw at you, that would be an advantage.
Well, they're only on the now, right now, they're whole future. Everywhere, they're multiple ways now that they would compare to others.
4, 3, 2, 1. Really good. We made it 11,000 and I'm ready to live it.
Airborne launch military centers, and that's a capability that we should have in our armamentarium and listen to them.
Thanks. So yeah, I learned armamentarium as a Scrabble word. I'm trying to wait to play it. But Dr. Carter, the rest his soul, he passed away, as you probably all know, recently. He was a visionary. I used to work for him when I was at OSD in the Pentagon, and he really was a visionary leader. And that's kind of where I'm coming at. Is we have to, as leaders, no matter where you're at, don't think about what you think what today looks like. Think about what tomorrow's going to be. Right? Because it's the visionaries that will define our capability. And as a former defense guy, our job is to be prepared for any contingency. And we've learned in the past that our inability to think has been detrimental. And so I would challenge all of us, what does the future look like? What is our adversary? And let's say in the South China Sea or in Ukraine is the closest example. What are they thinking? What is the next steps? And let's stay in front. Any questions on that? Because I'd rather hear you guys talk. If you don't have any questions, it's fine. But let me know. I've got like 5 charts, maybe 6, and it'll talk about a lot of the things that we're doing. But I really wanted to frame a discussion about where do we need to go, not only for the military uses and national security uses are really to secure the global commons so that we can use space for good, which is what Virgin Orbit's theme is. We don't want to fight. Nobody wants to. We're deterring things because we want to use space for what space is. Again, Sun Tzu said before, 520 something BC, high ground. So this is the high ground. So how do we secure it? And what are the things we need to do? Any questions on that or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what's the, let's say the payload limit, and what's the cost per kilo, if you have those numbers relative
For Virgin?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 72-inch diameter, or about 300 kilograms to 550 SSO. So we aren't certainly going to launch it as SIVers. The way I'm trying to describe it in the conversations we're having is we almost want to be like the AMRAAM missile, right? Fast replenishment and precise to Dr. Jah's comment about we don't want to leave a lot of debris. We're the Uber, not the bus, right? There are people that'll just put a whole bunch of stuff up there and there's debris and all. We are very precise, but it's not going to be a SIVers or a National Technical Needs satellite. It's precise injection, but our business model is a whitetail concept where we're building rockets, and you have a payload that needs to go for science and technology or anything like that. We're happy to do that. I'll talk a little bit about more about that here in a bit. Questions on this or the video? Yeah, I really like the video. I think the world of Dr. Carter and Admiral Blair and General Helms none of that was paid. We didn't pay them to speak a line. They did that on their own because they understand the need for this mission. Okay. So this will be a little Virgin Orbit specific, but I really wanted to frame the conversation. So there is no air-launched capability other than what we're doing. The Pegasus program that Northrop Grumman ran Bold Orbital was a air-launched solid fuel system. Unfortunately, their last launch is I think they're repurposing it to a hypersonics thing. So we're the only liquid fuel air launch capability, which means you can throttle, you can move things around, and it can be very flexible. And the whole purpose of this is if we are, God forbid, ever in an adversary relationship, we want to keep our adversaries on their heels, right? We want to make sure that we can keep the high ground and we can keep them on their heels so that we can prevail. And God forbid we have any conflicts. Nobody wants a conflict. Mobile infrastructure. We have updated our ground support equipment. to the point where we can put everything on an airplane, move it to any location around the globe. Drop the ground support equipment, run sorties, put everything back on the airplane and we're off. And so again, it's trying to keep any potential adversary on their heels. You may know we just had a mission out of Cornwall, England, which for those who Google Fisherman's Friend and Google my Cornwall, you can get a tear there. But this is just a great event. We ended up not having a successful mission on that. That was a second stage fuel tank issue. We're not the only launch system that's had these issues before, but the point being, we went to Cornwall, which was basically just a slab of concrete in an airport in the southwest of England, and we built a spaceport with the UK SA, with the RAF, but that can be replicated anywhere around the globe. You can see we're talking with folks in Japan, Brazil, and others. The point being, not only is it good for sovereign capability, if somebody wants to launch something from their own soil, because there never was a launch off of European soil ever. I mean, the first ones to do that. They launched most of the ESA and the other launched from French Guiana. So the point being, we can build a capability to launch from anywhere. So when you're looking at, so what does this mean? Who cares? Well, if you're an adversary, you're like, what in the world was that? And the SOCI network that is gauged right now at Cape Canaveral, Vandenberg, Kodiak, Wallops, isn't prepared for a launch from Peru. So it gives us the advantage to keep the enemy on their heels. Any questions or comments on that?
Hey, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Longtime colleague and admirer. Can you talk a little bit about your launch goal and repeat the question? Launch collision avoidance, how you do that, and what the process is for that, given the more dynamic nature for your launch profile?
Yeah, launch collision avoidance. Yeah, we have a very dynamic capability that I'll say for making sure we know exactly what's going on in terms of the current traffic and where we're going to come in. So that is a very good question, and it's something that we pay a lot of attention to. So, yeah, I think if I can tell me what is our approach to launch collision avoidance? You know, there's a lot of traffic in space, and when we launch, how do we know that we're not going to create havoc, if you will, because we're coming up from different azimuths that weren't expected. Everything's kind of used to coming out of the Cape or Vandenberg or some of the others. We're coming up from anywhere, and there is a very detailed analysis that we do that tracks that. And we are also working with NSDC and some of the CSPOC and some of the others to make sure they know. In fact, one of the things, as we're a new system, you know, after I left the military, I went to Lockheed, as you heard, and had a blast there. But then I came here, but it's a new system, and we're working with folks like Dennis Bythewood and others on what are the things that we need to make sure that they know about our system, and that we can do the right analysis. Obviously, we're not going to get in a position where we're shooting in the blind, if you will.
Is all that done by you? Virgin takes care of all that launch pool calculations and stuff, or do you depend on a third party?
Yeah, the question is all that done by us or third party, and it's us. We have it's very small relative, small company, but the analysis that we do, we have a really smart team that's really, this is an important thing. We're pretty much, I'd say 95% vertically integrated, both in production and in operations. So, but that's a good question. I'd like to think more about it with you and talk about it. The other thing I'll mention on the international, we were asked because of the fact that we have this anytime, anywhere, unworn capability. We have a model that we built in support of SCO and some others on anywhere on the globe. If we wanted to launch, where would be the right drop points? Because obviously we're not going to overfly somebody. we have to do all the right things safety wise, but that model has been built and so we basically, if there's a need to get something somewhere at a certain point in time, we can come from anywhere. All we need is a 747 capable airplane. Sorry to make this a Virgin Orbit thing. I really wanted to talk, but yes, sir.
Yeah, in terms of the legal, let's say, requirements for launch, and with your ability to deploy practically anywhere on the globe, when you launch, what is the launching state in a legal sense? So in other words, when you launch from Cornwall, is that a UK launch
Yes.
legally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because but for the first launch off the UK soil, the long pole in the tent wasn't the rocket. It was regulatory and licensing approvals because we had to get Portugal, Spain, Ireland, the UK, obviously, to be clean on exactly what we're gonna do. And, you know, overflight and NOTAMs and notice to mariners and all that stuff. But every time we would launch, it would be that nation's launch. And we would just be the you know, the provider, if you will. That's good question, because that's not an insignificant issue to have to get through the legal aspects to make sure that we're licensed. You know, FAA is used to us launching. The CAA in the UK didn't want to rely on anything, wanted to do all their own analysis, which I give them, you know, I applaud them for that. But it was a learning experience. And our launch slipped because of that, but we wanted to make it right. So,
And just to be clear on
Yes,
that
sir.
real quick, there's 4 potential launch states in any given scenario, right? The state that conducts the launch, who procures the launch, pays for it, the state from whose territory or facility, in this case, the flag state of the aircraft doing the launch. So there's 4 potential launch states in any given scenario,
yeah,
at least.
good point. Comments on that? Any other? I'd rather hear you guys talking than me, believe. This man.
Yeah, following up on that, because you do have ready aircraft is registered to the customer, the state where you take off, because you have an aircraft registered in one state that departs from another. But if the launch itself occurs in international airspace, have you met that challenge yet?
Yeah, well, all of our launches are done outside of the territorial waters. So we're 12 miles off for safety purposes. You know, like for instance, 2 launches ago, we came out of Mojave, flew out over Point Magoo, and we went to 45 degrees inclination south, which you normally can't do from the West Coast. But we're way out of that, and so FAA certifies that even though it's in the international waters. The question maybe gets to what are the implications for you're not in sovereign airspace and you're launching internationally?
Sea launch did that too.
Yeah.
Right, so in that question of what's the state of launch, I guess isn't that complicated to determine that on the ground and could easily be where the aircraft takes off.
There's not necessarily a single state of launch, right? There's up to 4 in total, potentially more in these international scenarios. And what happens then is that between the launch states, they determine a single state of readiness by agreement between them.
Right. Yeah. You should be teaching the class. This is exactly the implications. You know, we built a rocket sucking underneath of the 747, but these are the details that we work through every day. And we've got teams that are really working through, but it's something for space traffic management writ large, not just Virgin Orbit. These are the types of things we need to think about, because not only when it's up, then it's in orbit, and who owns it and where does it fit within you know, what's going on. Yes, sir.
So how's your business? Is Federal Systems throwing a good cash flow? Have you got good backlog? You read a lot about Richard pouring gobs of money, and he has a lot of money, but not infinite.
Right.
Is this an ongoing concern? There's 300 competitors you have.
No, it's a fair question, and I'll repeat it. It's just I don't know if everybody can hear, but the question is where are we at financially? Where are we at as a company? Virgin Orbit National Systems is poised to look at the national security space sector, which is a big a big demander, but the thing I would say is, you know, yes, Sir Richard Branson, we're very happy to have him as our CEO at the Virgin level. Dan Hart is our CEO at the Virgin Orbit level. And he is continuing to invest. The thing that we're looking at is what is our discriminator, right? It is not being a small launch provider, because a lot of people can do that, but nobody can do anytime, anywhere on one launch. And so that's where we're at right now. We'll see where we go with the company. You know, in the national security sector, it seems to move at the speed of government, right? And as a former government guy, I'm guilty as charged too, but it's one of those, do you see this as a mission need? And if you do, then because what I'm hearing from General Saltzman and others is having the ability to have tactically responsive space is a really highly desired capability, and you're going to have to practice how you're going to fight. And God forbid. And again, this is all deterrence based, but the first time an F-15 pilot pulls the trigger in an air scenario is not the first time he's now in a dogfight. It is when he's practicing, or her practicing at 10. And the same thing goes with the tank driver. Same thing needs to go with this, because this is providing an ISR capability or other capability. And so the Space Force is highly interested in building a capability. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to the question. Hopefully we can talk later more if you'd like.
Do you have plans to increase your mass and altitude you can reach?
Yeah, the question is, do you have plans to increase mass and altitude? Yes, we are. Our NRE work is going from 300 and higher. I said 72 inches diameter rocket. The height, there are people that are approached us on third stage, you know, being able to do a lift to geosynchronous and beyond. So yeah, that's part of the plan. It's just sequencing the plan to make sure that we're doing the right thing. The first thing we want to make sure is providing a capability for fire and forget, and make sure that we are, like I said, kind of the AMRAAM. If you have a need, one of the big conversations we're having, maybe on another chart, but is with Indo-PACOM, who has a real issue, right? That if there's a peer competition in the South China Sea, I should probably just go to that. I'll come back to that. If there's a peer competition in the South China Sea, let's say we see massing at amphibious ports and we're worried about an attack or a takeover of Taiwan, all unclassified. And all of a sudden, Admiral Aquilino, who's the commander of Indo-PACOM, and his command center cannot see or hear anything. Is that a problem? Yeah, it is. Right. So what do you do? So one of the things we're talking about is, you know, small sat technology, and that's the difference between now and 10, 15 years ago, is such that you could probably have a capability. It's certainly not going to be exquisite, but it can be a capability that we can get up in 24 hours. And so that is the deterrent that we talked about. Again, we're not here trying to spoil for a fight. What we're trying to do is deter it so we can actually use space for the global good. And so this capability is, if we needed to throw something up quickly, we can do that. And that gives them some capability if they were all of a sudden blinded to that. Any thoughts on that?
Hey, Mark.
This,
So I think part of the problem would be that you can't build a nice satellite, have them in the warehouse, per se, right? Don't know what capability you need with the car asset or the CEO, the you know, so how do you work with the stakeholder to get that in place so that you can do that?
yeah, good question. The question was missions that, how do you predict what you're going to need? I guess is what summarize that. And where I come back to is what General Saltzman and General Burt, who's the COO, and others. Like the price point is now such that you can have multiple things and then you could practice them. So for instance, if you wanted to have a EO capable satellite and you put it up there, the COCOMs, and you know this better than anybody, the COCOMs built their operational plan. Sorry to be so military here, but just give me a second. The operational plans are built based on any contingency because we have to be prepared as a DoD, right? So the COCOMs built their O plans based on the idea that they would always have space capability because it was a benign environment. As soon as you had someone in space, wasn't threatened at all. That's not the case today. Every asset in space is threatened. You saw Dr. Carter said it a lot better than I could. So the COCOMs have to plan. So what happens if I don't have exquisite capability? How do I operate? How do I achieve my objectives given the joint fight, right? So the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all of that has to come together and achieve objectives. And if you don't have exquisite, how do you handle that? So when we do these launches, what we're hearing from the decision makers are, let's just put something up there. It'll have leave behind capability, and then you can plan around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but as I look at like what we've seen happen in this training, and maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow in the security thing panel is, Maxar capability, Planet needs more capability, Capella needs more capability. So if you look at that from a commercial perspective,
Right.
they're offering those capabilities up to the government. How do you get them to invest and go, hey, if a conflict happens, we're going to need more capability.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember the video, all of those pictures that you saw from the Ukraine, that was all commercial. There's no government. That was all we saw. Max, all of the companies you mentioned, and that's a real issue that we're seeing where the government is looking at. You guys just do that because the government's got their plates full doing the exquisite stuff. But again, if you have that and you're protecting the global commons, going back to the naval example, then you can have commerce without fear of somebody just taking you out. So it's one of those things. It's a real question that the government is struggling with. Is this the global commons or is it just point protection? So anyway, let me go back.
Quick follow-up on that. It was interesting, US Spacecom conference yesterday, the Maxar, president was saying that they've actually sold services above and beyond what we have here in the US to Australia. And they're looking at that as a nice way to encourage us.
Yeah. To that point, the protection of the global commons to me is Five Eyes, it's others. If everybody is like, for instance, going back to the naval, I'm an Air Force guy, so I'm talking Navy terms, which is dangerous. But the reason that there's a 12-mile limit and the open waters are protected was because everybody decided that this was going to be the rules of the road, the rules of the sea. And anybody that is breaking those, everybody sees it and can call them out. And that to me, the Air Force doesn't like that because they want to be more point solution. But that's exactly, the Aussies are in a rough neck of the woods, right? They're in a tough environment where they're at. And in fact, we have a team that just left Australia this morning talking to them about it. And they are really interested in making sure that we have a collection of nations that say this is what safety and security look like. And then anybody that violates any of those rules becomes, the odd man or the odd person out, and they get called out on it. So that to me is where I think the future lies. This isn't a Virgin Orbit thing. This is as a former military guy. If we get there, I think we've done our right job. Okay, just a few different things that, if you think about responsive space is what we've been talking about, right? If you need to get something out in a precise location, we can do that for you from anywhere. Hypersonic testing, we are not a company who is interested in putting warheads on orbits. We don't, but we can do testing. Because the future, as technology unfolds, one thing that is extremely scary is the fact that the adversary has a capability to do, and when we say hypersonic, it means it's non-ballistic. It can go anywhere and then it can land, and we have to be able to defend that against that. So we're very interested in being a part of hypersonic testing, because we can put this defense agency is very interested, obviously, in this. And we're involved in that, and so we can talk about that if you like. Missile defense target. Right now, the current way they do it, you can see there in the picture, they have a missile defense target rocket on a C-17. They drag it out of the back of it with drogue parachutes, C-17 egresses, and they launch it in a ballistic trajectory, and that's how they test. Our defense against that. That's very dangerous. And C-17 fleet is a little bit busy, and so we're getting involved in that because we think that if you're just shooting a missile off a rocket and it can go on a ballistic, either orbital or suborbital trajectory, so we're involved in that. I'm happy to talk about that. Point to point out is interesting. So, U.S. Transportation Command is a combatant command, and their job is to get stuff where it needs to be, when it needs to be here. Sounds interesting, it's like FedEx, right? Yeah. But right now they do land, sea, and air. And now they're thinking, okay, in a contested environment, let's say you can't get in with land, sea, and air because you will be denied by an adversary. Why don't you think about bringing stuff in either from an orbital or suborbital capability? So it's fascinating to me as a former military, because I never thought about that. If you have to put stuff in for folks that are in contact, but you can't get in there or else you'll get shot, let's say, you can bring stuff in from space and drop it down. And so there's a cooperative research and development agreement, that we were involved with, but the folks at U.S. Transcom and AFRL, Air Force Research Lab, are really interested in this. And it's just interesting to me, because again, we don't have the ability to launch tons and tons and tons of equipment, but we can do very, very precise Uber deliveries, and sometimes that's necessary. So that's one of the interesting things. And then contingency ops, really to us, is if you had troops that were in contact in areas that weren't traditional, and we launched out of the cave in Baird, and everybody knows where we're going to be in terms of the orbital mechanics. But if you have somebody in non-traditional locations, we can launch from anywhere and provide that coverage. I mentioned hypersonics and point-to-point, so I won't belabor this. It's just something that is of high interest right now, especially with the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Heidi Shu, and Dr. Plant. They're very, very much thinking about the fight after next, because we've been lucky to have, I shouldn't say lucky, it's something, we've been engaged in the Middle East for 20 years plus, right? A very, very lethal, less sophisticated adversary. We don't have that luxury going forward, because if we get into a fight, whether it's the Ukraine spilling over into NATO, which is a bad day, or China, Taiwan, China, South China Sea, any of that, we've got to up our game. So what we're trying to do is lead the thinking on helping the Space Force, if they stand up as a service, and others to think through what are the worst case scenarios, how do you prepare to defeat any attack or any problem. Now it sounds kind of dour, I don't want to come across that way. The purpose of the DoD is to protect the American people and our allies. And so we have to think about worst case scenarios. And we at Virgin Orbit are trying to help that because, I was at the JMS program, which we talked about earlier, and with Charlie and a lot of folks on trying to figure out how do we make sure that we know what's going on, we can detect it, we can sense it, and then we can protect the things that we need to protect. And that's kind of, I'm more of an ideologue than, to care about the mission. I think that's a shortcoming, I don't know. All right, that's it, and that's all I had. I can talk all day long. So we could probably do it here, but Is there any other? Yes, sir. Yeah, we had one 747 Cosmic Girl that came out of service and for Virgin Atlantic. We have a plan to go to 3. We have the interesting thing is simultaneous operations from anytime, anywhere, and more locations. So our customer is very interested in that, and believe it or not, 747s now are, it's not like we're buying a Lamborghini. It's a beautiful airplane, but we need to have more than one, and that's the plan. Good question. Yes, sir.
What are the differences between Virgin Orbit launcher and the Pegasus rocket from NorthStar?
The difference between our launcher and Pegasus from Northrop, they go off of an L-1011, which is a much older aircraft. They're a solid rocket capability. So when you light a solid rocket, just think it's gone. I mean, there's no throttling. It's just like, hold on. It's a very rough ride. And I think the world of all those boats. Ours is liquid fuel, which means we can throttle, we can adjust trajectories. And the last Pegasus launch, I said earlier, it looks like it was repurposed to be a hypersonics thing, and then they're done. They don't have any more in the bucket. Scott Staff, as you know, Scott Staff is works in Norfolk, a good friend of mine. They had a great program. They have a great program in Pegasus, but it's sunsetting, and we're kind of taking that air launched role, but in a liquid fuel, which is interesting. Excellent. You good? Yes.
Make spacecraft management more effective, we're going to we need to harmonize the differences between different national regulatory systems. I would think you would elaborate a little bit more on some of the problems you may have had with the UK versus US system through that launch, and anything else you may be experiencing in relation.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating, the experience that we've all been through. As not only National Reconnaissance Office, I can say that was involved in that, the Space Force, the UK Space Agency, the RAF, us, went through detailed on how do you support the analysis of, obviously, we call it quantity distance, or any kind of problem that you would have, make sure that people in facilities are safe. So we went through detailed analysis, and the FAA relies on certain assumptions. The CAA, to their credit, I'll say, did not. They said, we want to do our own analysis. And so they engaged a third-party company to do what is the explosive sighting distance that we should deal with if, God forbid, we had a really bad day, either on the ground as we're getting ready to go or in the air. And their analysis was quite different than ours. And ours being FAA, only my Virgin hat on and putting on my own government military hat. The analysis was quite different, but it was a very healthy conversation that was painful at the time, because it made us slip for a bit. But I will tell you that the leadership of the UTSA and the RAF, and frankly, all the way up to the Prime Minister, was very supportive of, we want to do this, let's get this right. If we have just differences, then let's work through them. And we, we, Merge Northern, were very respectful. So I think that's the template for, let's say we launch out of, kind of joke, Lima, Peru, we launched out of Japan, who was very interested in dealing with us. We have a template now for how to put the regulatory licensing process in place. It's quite helpful. And again, the whole purpose here is not only a sovereign launch, it's how do we, as allies, keep our adversary on their heels? Because once you take the 747 out and it gets put into the air traffic control net, it's just a headache. It's the old coconut shell, pea, how do you know where's it at now? And again, it's not meant to be offensive, it's just meant to be a deterrent. That's the whole goal on what we're doing.
Quick follow-up on the fleet question. With respect to acquiring from Virgin Atlantic, it's been in service, you gotta tear all that stuff out, I'm sure. Curious, what would be, going forward, the ideal, get it new or get it used from Virgin Atlantic? And then what is the conversion time frame typically? And especially if you had to do it quickly, how compact you think you can get more new?
Yeah, right. It's funny, you mentioned the conversion. So the 747 came out of passenger service. So in my office, not in the small office in Nelson Window, the Virgin Orbit production facilities in Long Beach, we've got 747 seats. You want to come by and sit on a 747 seat? Because they tore all that stuff. They took all that stuff out. And actually, it was lighter. We had to not continue to pull stuff out because it was too light for the FAA certification. So they had to keep a certain amount of stuff in there. But if you ever go on the coffee grill, it's amazing. It's like a bowling alley on the flight deck. But to your question, if we were to get another 747, it would take 6 months to modify because the truth be told, this is hopefully interesting to everybody, but the 747 was built with a pylon on the left wing that was meant to carry spare engines to the locations that needed to have an engine. So it already was upsized, if you will, with the weighting and all that stuff. So it was relatively quick to say, we just need to modify, we put our, the thing that holds the rocket and all, that goes pretty quickly. Then obviously on the upper deck is where we have the engineer workstations, and we have up to four specific things having to do with that. And so the wiring of that goes pretty quickly. The question though, I think that is interesting that maybe you asked, maybe you did, but so what does the future look like for this capability? I mean, air launched liquid fuel, this is something that would be very helpful to the government in a deterrent capability. And we have models such as a depot, or it doesn't have to be a 747, it could be something else. And so we're just offering this capability, and if it makes sense to do it off of C-17, you can probably work that. There's distance from the ground, there's a whole bunch of engineering that has to get done, but it's really, we're interested in bringing a capability to the DoD so that they can do their deterrence missions so that we can do space for good. If you look at the Virgin Orbit group, we want space for good. We don't want to do anything fighting, we want to do deterrence. So that's our big mission message. And this capability is of concern to the adversary. We know that. Good discussion. But yeah, you're right. 747s they're not coming offline anymore. So, but this capability can do pretty much with modification for it. All right, so I flipped through the charts. We saw the video is cooler than my talk. I know. Is there any questions about where we're at? Because what we want to be able to do is, to the comment that was made earlier, we don't want to leave a bunch of garbage space. We're very precise. our reentry and everything is very clean. We're not gonna just put a bunch of debris up there, because that's a problem, that we dealt with when I was in the previous flight. But the capability that we've got, I'm very proud of. We are working very diligently to mature the capabilities so that it's basically required to get this sort
Earlier concept was to put, your rocket on White Knight. What became of that?
the Virgin Galactic.
Yeah.
It didn't have this was before we got home in there a year and a half, but I don't think it would have had the capability to launch, Launcher One rocket off of White Knight. I know that Virgin Orbit, the current instantiation came out of Virgin Galactic, so there was a lot of discussion. I straddle launch, is doing a rocket underneath an airplane too, but that is a monster, vehicle. So I don't think it's capable, but 747 is very ubiquitous right now, especially with the, when we went through COVID and we had some supply chain issues. There's a lot of demands on 747, but there's a fleet of 747s that we have access to. It goes to the earlier question. We're looking at going from 1 to 3. Yes, sir.
So, to put your JMS hat back on, so this Department of Commerce, Office of Space Commerce, putting together a space traffic coordination space safety system. What lessons would you offer to them to avoid the negative outcome that was JMS?
Yeah, look at Charlie. It was good when you left. The thing that we did set up with JMS that I would offer is you constantly have to be practicing and running capabilities through. How do you? Because basically what you're talking about is a software system, right? The sensor network needs to be in place, but you have to have a software system that grows, that understands, and becomes. And nowadays we call it, artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's a cool new term, but that's really what we talk about. And I would say that you need to have the operators and the acquirers very close, because the acquirers will build to a certain requirement set, but the requirement set is constantly going to change. Does that make sense?
No, that's honestly, it doesn't, and I don't see the machine learning and artificial intelligence actually playing a direct role in what the Department of Commerce is doing, so I'm confused by that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that, because what we're talking about is how do you have an air traffic control net that continues to understand in space now what's happening? How do you upgrade the sensory network around it, and how do you fuse that better? Because in JMS, the way we set it up was the operator had people that were paying attention to the requirement, and this is on a 6-month scale. I mean, it moved very fast. And the acquirer sat with the operator, and they were thinking through, hey, here's what you need, here's what we can do, here's how we program. And as soon as certain leaders left, basically the operators were like, just tell me just give me my product. And that connection of comms between the operators and the ones that are providing the capability was lost. And that's when JMS ran into the ditch.
I get that, thank you.
Yeah, we can talk more to this. I would be happy to help. I believe in this stuff. Okay. Good. I can do this off. Seriously, any questions about what you saw? And again, this doesn't have to be a Virgin Orbit sales pitch. It really is. How do we prepare ourselves to deter any benign bad behaviors so that we can expand space for good? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of that question, but more to Virgin Orbit hat on. Is there anything that
Virgin Orbit needs or wants out of this track system that would be beneficial to your operations that comes to mind right now?
Tracks.
Oh, so the system that Mark mentioned, the traffic coordination system for space, the opposite space commerce system.
Well, good question, as we, because we're building a capability to really be basically almost like an airline, but it's doing the space stuff. I would want to make sure that we have that connection so that our mission design work goes very quickly. For instance, we had 2 missions ago, we were going to be taking off out of Mojave, dropping down south, and then launching, by the Baja Peninsula. And the Navy called and said, hey, by the way, we didn't tell you, but we've got Navy warship activity exercises going on. Can you push your launch for 4 hours, 5 hours? And as an old fixed launch guy, there's no way. That would take a week to reprogram that. They did it in like minutes. They got approved from the FAA and they moved it. But as we start getting our pace and our cadence up, I want to make sure that those comm channels were open so that, hey, look, we have an issue. Are you good? Are we good? And that comes with cadence. Because if you do it just one off launch, that's not hard. But if you're doing it on a, say we're launching 12, 13 rockets a year, we just need to have those comm channels open. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, you guys are tired. Tired of hearing me talk. This has been good. I really appreciate the fact that I'm here at the home of the UT. This is great. If there's anything I can do, you'll have my contact information. I'm happy to chat, answer questions, talk about this, but the conversation is more important than charts. I'm not a big powerful guy. The conversation about where are we and where do we need to be, because we need to be out in front of any bad day. My biggest worry, in coming from my former life, if we have another Pearl Harbor to tell us we got an issue, that's not going to go well, because it's not going to be limited to an island chain and ships in Hawaii. It's going to be devastating because our whole economy relies on space and the commerce that comes through it and by it. So, all right, anything else? All right, thank you very much.